Hey guys, what's up? It's Karl here, back with my review episode of the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. It's been around 2 weeks where I've got to use the phone and kind of tested the ins and outs of Samsung's latest flagship. We'll get the thing out of the way first, which everyone talks about. I've mentioned this in my unboxing when I first saw the phone. 1,400 cookies for this device. This is the most expensive phone that Samsung's come out with, and it's even more expensive than other well-known flagships, and I'm hoping this isn't the reason for Apple to increase their prices in September. But what Samsung has done here has crammed every high-end spec. They've thrown the hardware sheet at this, packed it into one device and say, yeah, it's justified, it's worth it, just looking at the numbers, because it is a beast and it deserves that name, Ultra. With that price factor out of the way, let's get into design, and I think Samsung kept it safe, but made some very minor changes to make this phone really great. Colorways, very much on the safe end. When we look back to the Note 10, they had Aura Glow, the CD-like finish. They've kept things very muted, and I'm not necessarily against that. This gray colorway reminds me, for any of you car buffs, Nardo Gray. I like things super minimal, and I know that ends up coming down to personal preference. Obviously, we've got the large camera sensor on the back, more on that in a bit, but when you flip around things to the front, the display, Samsung hands down makes the best displays on the market. The Ultra is now 6.9 inches, which makes it even bigger than the Note 10 Plus from last year. Could we possibly see a 7-inch Note 20 Plus come at the end of 2020? Now, it's a very tall device, even larger than my iPhone 11 Pro Max. If you're using it one hand, it's almost impossible to reach the top. It does make web browsing easier. You get more content, say when you're scrolling through Twitter, but when you are watching media, any sort of video in landscape, you get larger letterboxings around the sides. The screen out of the box does come in at full HD, but that's where you can take advantage of the 120 Hz refresh rate. And I kind of go back and forth, because unless you're really pixel peeping, you can't see the difference between full HD to quad HD. And maybe that's just the dilemma of building the perfect smartphone. You can't have every single option you want, and I'm sure if we could, that would really impact the battery, and maybe we'll talk about that next. It's been my favorite feature of the Ultra. 5,000 milliamps, that's a ton of juice inside. I haven't even come close to draining it in one day, and I typically have 6 to 7 hours of screen on time, using it pretty heavily, playing a ton of games, browsing social, always having GPS enabled. There have even been days where I've got 2 full days of use. If you're a power user, you'll love it. And to finish off design on the display, they've kind of toned down how far the screen wraps around, and I found that previous Samsung phones, it was almost too much with the wraparound glass. This year it's more subtle, and I don't get any more accidental presses with my thumb or palm. Front-facing camera cutout is nice and small. We sadly have no more headphone jack, but we still get the bonus of adding a micro SD card, and we do have the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor in the front. That's one of my biggest faults. It's still a bit slow, still a bit sluggish, and I'm really hoping they can fix that in software updates, which is a perfect segue actually into the cameras, because once again, if you look at the specs, it's a beast. 108 megapixels, and that's pretty nuts for a smartphone camera. The sensor is nice and large, so with that you get a ton more bokeh. There's a shallower depth of field when you're snapping photos with it. I do find though, with that sensor, there's a hint of lag on the shutter. Sometimes focus is a hit or miss, and I know Samsung's addressed those issues. They said when the phone fully comes available, they'll already have a fix, but this is kind of where we stand now. Sometimes I think the photos are leaning a bit to the cool side, maybe a tad bit undersaturated, but it is the best camera that Samsung has made. It's on par, maybe sometimes below, depending on the shot compared to, say, the Pixel 4 or the iPhone. And I'm not too sure if that's enough, as this is a new flagship in 2020, and we're expected to see the Pixel 5 and the iPhone 12. Obviously, that's coming later on in the year. To the big selling point, which is the 100 times space zoom. Is that super practical? As it is a combination of both optical and digital, once you're getting to that full zoom in range, obviously stuff is gonna look grainy. I think it's nice to have the fact that we have it. It's awesome to see tech being pushed to its limits. I think it's one of those times where the number is just more impressive and the practicality isn't always there, but dope to see Samsung pushing tech in the right direction. On the flip side, 8K video, I find that way more impressive. Keep in mind, there are a few more limitations. When you are in 8K, it is cropped in way more than when you're recording in regular. Stabilization doesn't work as well either, so just ensure the phone's either on a tripod or just be very still when you are recording in 8K. Performance-wise, as you'd expect for a $1,400 flagship, it's an absolute dream. Everything is buttery smooth, quick, and snappy. We've got the Snapdragon 865, and you can spec this guy with up to 16 gigs of RAM. That's more than most laptops have. Samsung has made huge improvements to One UI, and this is probably the best Android phone that you can currently get on the market. $1,400, yeah, it's a ton of money. You do get the Overload or the Ultra of specs. It's probably overkill for most people, but if you grab this device, it'll easily last you 3 to 4 years. I can see this phone aging really, really well. There are better options out there, even looking further down the S20 lineup. The standard S20 still packs a great punch, has very similar internals, you just don't get some of the higher end camera specs, but like I said, do you really need to zoom in 100 times? Having the best of the best usually results in you having to pony up those cookies, so do save up if you are eyeing this device. Let me know your thoughts on the Samsung S20 Ultra. Curious to see if Samsung does bring those software updates to fix some of those minor camera issues. The fingerprint sensor is still a bit too choppy, so I don't even have a passcode yet. Other than those small irks, I'll continue to use the Ultra as my daily. We'll probably use it until the next Android flagship comes around. Smash that like button if you are a Nardo Gray fan, because I just can't get over how close this colorway is. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will catch you guys in one of my next ones or one of my vlogs. Peace.